The auction block groaned under Nahela's weight as the auctioneer's gavel struck wood. 7 feet of prime Apache meat, gentlemen. Too tall for breeding stock, but look at those haunches. The crowd of ranchers and butchers leaned forward, calculating pounds of flesh while she stood in iron shackles, her obsidian eyes burning with defiance. $50, shouted Mordecai Grimm, the town's largest meat processor, his tobacco-stained teeth gleaming. She'll feed half of Dustwater. For a month, Nahela's jaw clenched. 3 winters ago, cavalry soldiers had dragged her from the burning remains of her village after she'd killed 5 men with her bare hands defending the children. They'd tried everything, breeding programs, manual labor, even the circus, but her towering frame and fierce spirit had made her worthless for everything except the slaughterhouse. 60, called another voice. The bidding escalated while she studied the crowd, memorizing faces for the revenge she'd sworn upon her ancestors' graves. Her gaze stopped on a lean figure leaning against the saloon's porch post. A cowboy with storm-gray eyes and silver-streaked hair, watching her with something that wasn't hunger for profit. $100, Grimm bellowed, confident in his final bid. The cowboy pushed off the post, his spurs chiming as he approached. 500, gasps rippled through the crowd. Grimm's face purpled. What in tarnation you want with that much Apache for, Kestrel Ravencroft? Kestrel's weathered hands hung loose at his sides, but Nahela recognized a gunfighter's stance. Private business, Grimm. 550, Grimm countered, desperation creeping into his voice. 1,000. The auctioneer's hammer trembled. $1,000 could buy a small ranch. Silence stretched like a noose until the hammer fell. Sold to Kestrel Ravencroft. As the shackles transferred from the auction house to Kestrel's custody, Nahela studied her new captor. He was tall himself, though her eyes still met the top of his hat brim. His face bore the weathered maps of hard living, but his touch on... The chain was gentle. Can you ride? He asked quietly. She nodded once. He led her to a massive black stallion, clearly chosen for her size, and unlocked her ankle chains. Mount up. Every instinct screamed trap, but curiosity stayed her hand. From his throat, she swung onto the horse with practiced grace, and he mounted a paint mare beside her. They rode in silence through Dustwater's dusty streets, past gawking settlers and disappointed butchers. The town fell behind them as they headed into the purple-hazed mountains where ancient Apache spirits still walked. After an hour, Kestrel reined in beside a crystal stream. He dismounted and approached her slowly, key in hand. I'm going to unlock these, he said, indicating her wrist shackles. You can kill me and run, or you can hear what I'm offering. Nahela's muscles coiled. Speak. I need a partner, not a slave. Something big is coming to these mountains. Something that's already killed 3 of my best men. I can't face it alone. His gray eyes met hers without flinching. I saw you fight when they took your village. That's not meat on the auction. Block. That's a warrior. The shackles fell away. Nahela's wrists were raw circles of freedom as she flexed her fingers, feeling strength return to her massive frame. For 6 months those chains had defined her existence. Now this strange cowboy had paid a fortune to remove them in the middle of nowhere. You could have bought a dozen gunmen for that price, she said, her voice rusty from months of enforced silence. Kestrel gathered deadwood for a fire, his movements economical. Gunmen die easy when they face what's been hunting these mountains. I need someone who fights like the earth itself is at stake. She studied him as he worked. Most white men couldn't meet her eyes, either from fear of her size or shame at their people's treatment of hers. But Kestrel Ravencroft looked at her like she was simply another person, dangerous but deserving of respect. What killed your men? She asked. He struck flint to tinder, the sparks dancing like tiny spirits, something that shouldn't exist. Tracks the size of dinner plates, claws that shred pine trees, and smart enough to set traps. The kindling caught, throwing shadows across his weathered face. Pedro Gonzalez was first. Found him 30 feet up a ponderosa, torn in half. Then Billy Thunderheart, good tracker, found strung up like a scarecrow with symbols carved in the trees around him. Nahela's blood chilled. She recognized the description, old warnings from her grandmother about the Yi Naldlushi, skinwalkers, who'd abandoned their humanity for dark power. But those were legends, cautionary tales told around winter fires. The third man, Joaquin Morales, found what was left of him yesterday. Kestrel's jaw tightened. Whatever's doing this, it's getting bolder. Started taking livestock from the outer ranches. Soon it'll come for the town. She knelt beside the stream, cupping the cold mountain, water to wash the auction block's grime from her face and arms. The reflection looking back at her was scarred, but unbroken. A warrior, as he'd said, not cattle marked for slaughter. "Why me?" she pressed. "Besides my size." Kestrel pulled hardtack and jerky from his saddlebags, offering her half. "Because you're Apache. Your people know this land's secrets better than any of us. And because—" he paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Because you've got nothing left to lose and everything to prove." The truth of it hit harder than any blow. Her tribe was scattered or dead. Her freedom had been bought with a stranger's gold. She was alone in a world that saw her as either spectacle or meat. "What's your offer?" she asked. "Partnership. Equal. Shares of whatever bounty we can collect for stopping this thing. Your freedom, regardless of the outcome." His gray eyes held steady. "And if we survive, I've got a ranch that could use a strong hand. Not as hired help, as a partner." Nahala bit into the jerky, her mind racing. In her grandmother's stories, skinwalkers could only be killed by those who understood both worlds, the white man's guns and the Apache's ancient wisdom. Kestrel Ravencroft might be her people's enemy, but he was offering something no one else had in months: respect. "The creature you describe," she said slowly. "It's not just hunting, it's performing rituals. The positioning of the bodies, the carved symbols, it's trying to become something more powerful." Kestrel leaned forward. "What kind of ritual?" "The kind that requires 7 deaths to complete." She met his gaze. "How many ranchers live in these mountains?" His face went pale. 4 families plus the town, maybe 50 people total. Then we're already running out of time. Nahala stood, her full height casting a long shadow in the firelight. "I accept your partnership, Kestrel Ravencroft. But know this, when we face this evil, there may be no coming back from what we'll have to do." He extended his hand. "I wouldn't expect anything less from a warrior." Their handshake sealed more than a business agreement. It bound 2 outcasts together against something older and darker than either of their people's wars. The Weatherby Ranch sat in a valley cupped by pine-covered ridges, its main house dark except for a single lamp burning in an upstairs window. Kestrel and Nahala approached on foot, leaving their horses picketed a half-mile back, after finding the cattle pasture littered with mutilated carcasses. 30 head, Nahala whispered, examining the carnage by moonlight. "Killed for pleasure, not food." The ritual marks carved into nearby trees confirmed her worst fears. The skinwalker was accelerating its timeline, growing bolder and more powerful. With each death, soon it would be strong enough to challenge any force the territory could muster. They crept toward the house, Nahala's moccasined feet silent despite her size. Kestrel moved like a ghost beside her, his Colt drawn but held low. The silence felt wrong. No crickets, no nightbirds. Even the wind had stilled as if nature itself held its breath. The front door hung open, creaking gently on its hinges. "Fresh blood," Nahala breathed, catching the copper scent on the air. They found Cornelius Weatherby in his study, slumped over his desk with his throat open to the stars. But it was the positioning that made Nahala's skin crawl. His body had been arranged with ritual precision, surrounded by symbols that seemed to writhe in the lamplight. 4 deaths, she counted grimly. 3 to go. A child's scream pierced the night. They raced upstairs, following the sound to a bedroom where 8-year-old Melody Weatherby pressed herself against the far wall, pointing at the window. Dark claws gripped the frame from outside, and yellow eyes glowed in a face that was almost human but wrong in every detail that mattered. The skinwalker's voice was silk over broken glass. "Come out, little morsel. The moon is perfect for dying." Kestrel's pistol barked twice, silver bullets punching through the window frame. The creature shrieked and vanished into darkness, but not before Nahala glimpsed its true form, a twisted hybrid of man and wolf, covered in ritual scars and wearing a necklace of human teeth. "Where's your mother?" Nahala asked the trembling child. "Hiding in the root cellar with baby Marcus," Melody whispered. "Mama said to wait for the monster to go away." "Smart woman." Kestrel reloaded his cylinder with practiced speed. "We need to get them all to town before—" The house shuddered as something massive struck the roof. Dust rained from the ceiling as claws scraped across wooden shingles, circling like a predator testing its cage. "It's playing with us," Nahala realized, driving us into a trap. Through the broken window, she could see more yellow eyes reflecting moonlight from the tree line. The skinwalker had summoned allies, lesser corrupted spirits that fed on fear and blood. The Weatherby Ranch had become a killing ground. "Can you get to the cellar?" Kestrel asked. Nahala nodded. "What about you?" "I'm going to give them something else to hunt." His storm-gray eyes held grim determination. Apache courage isn't the only kind that runs deep. Before she could protest, he was gone, vaulting through the shattered window onto the roof. His boots drummed overhead as he engaged the skinwalker directly, gunfire and inhuman roars echoing through the night. Nahala scooped up Melody and raced downstairs. The root cellar lay behind the kitchen, its heavy wooden door barred from inside. She pounded on it frantically. "Mrs. Weatherby, it's safe. We're here to help." The bar scraped back and Helena Weatherby emerged, clutching her infant son. She was younger than Nahala had expected, maybe 25, with cornsilk hair and eyes wide with terror. "The Apache girl from town," Helena breathed. "But you were sold for meat, I know." Nahala knelt to the woman's level, making herself less threatening. "Right now, I'm your best chance of seeing sunrise. Can you ride?" Helena nodded. "But Cornelius is dead. I'm sorry." Nahala's voice was gentle but firm. "We have to go. Now." The sounds of battle raged above them as they gathered the children and what supplies they could carry. Kestrel was holding his own for the moment, but Nahala could hear the skinwalker's allies circling closer. Soon they would be overwhelmed. As they prepared to make their desperate run to the horses, Helena grasped Nahala's massive arm. "Why are you helping us? After everything my people did to yours?" Nahala looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully, despite the chaos around them. Innocent life was innocent life, regardless of the color of its skin or the crimes of its ancestors. "Because some things are bigger than our people's wars," she said simply. "And because a good man just bought my freedom to save all of us." The run to the horses became a nightmare of shadows and glowing eyes. Nahala led the way, carrying both children while Helena clutched her baby and a rifle she barely knew how to use. Behind them, the sounds of Kestrel's battle grew fainter, punctuated by inhuman howls that raised the hair on Nahala's neck. "There," Helena gasped, pointing to the dark shapes of their mounts in the moonlight. They'd almost reached safety when the first of the lesser spirits materialized from the tree line. A gaunt thing that might once have been human, its limbs stretched to impossible proportions and its face a nightmare of teeth and hunger. It moved with spider-quick grace, cutting off their escape route. Nahala set the children down gently. "Helena, take them to the horses. I'll clear the path." "You can't fight that thing. Watch me." The creature lunged with inhuman speed, but Nahala was ready. Her grandmother had taught her the old ways of fighting spirits, not just with weapons, but with will and knowledge. She caught the thing's claws in her bare hands, her Apache strength magnified by righteous fury. "You are lost," she whispered in the old tongue, speaking words her grandmother had taught her. "Return to the darkness that spawned you." Sacred syllables had power. The creature shrieked as holy fire seemed to burn along its twisted limbs. It tried to break free, but Nahala's grip was iron. With a sound like tearing silk, she ripped its arms from its body and cast the pieces into the night. Helena stared in shock as the thing dissolved into black mist. "How did you—" "Later, move." They reached the horses just as Kestrel came crashing through the underbrush, his shirt torn and bloody, but his gray eyes still burning with fight. "Mount up, it's bringing the whole pack." The forest erupted with howls as a dozen spirits gave chase. Nahala boosted Helena and the children onto the largest horse before vaulting onto her own mount. Kestrel's paint mare was already moving as he hit the saddle. They thundered through the mountain paths, the spirits keeping pace through the trees like a living nightmare. Yellow eyes gleamed from every shadow, and more than once claws raked across their backs as something leapt from an overhanging branch. "The town!" Kestrel shouted over the wind. "Sacred ground! The church!" Dustwater appeared below them, its scattered lights a promise of sanctuary. But as they galloped down the main street, Nahala saw something that made her blood freeze. The church doors stood open, and no light burned within. "It's already been here," she realized. They skidded to a halt before the chapel. "Inside, Father." Martinez lay sprawled across the altar, his body positioned with the same ritual precision they'd seen at the ranch. The fifth death. Only 2 remained before the skinwalker achieved ultimate power. "The sheriff's office," Kestrel said grimly. "Strong walls, plenty of ammunition." But Sheriff Duncan's office was empty too, windows shattered and blood painting abstract patterns on the walls. The 6th victim. Nahala's heart hammered as she realized the truth. "It's hurting us," she said. "All of this. It wants us alive for the final ritual. 7 deaths to complete its transformation, and we're meant to be the last." The pack of spirits emerged from the darkness, surrounding them in the town square. At their center stalked the skinwalker itself, now grown to almost Nahala's height, and radiating malevolent power. Its human features had almost completely disappeared, replaced by something primordial and hungry. The Apache warrior and her white knight. It spoke, its voice like grinding bones. "How perfect! Your deaths will birth a god." Helena raised her rifle with shaking hands. "Stay back, you monster!" The skinwalker laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Bullets cannot harm me now, little mother, but your fear is delicious." It was right. Conventional weapons would be useless against something this far gone. Nahala stepped forward, placing herself between the creature and the others. "Then face me alone," she challenged. "Warrior to whatever you've become." The thing's yellow eyes fixed on her with hungry anticipation. "Yes, the blood of chieftains will make my ascension complete." As it gathered itself to strike, Nahala reached for the medicine bundle she'd worn hidden beneath her shirt, the only thing from her old life that the soldiers had allowed her to keep. Her grandmother's final gift, blessed by tribal shamans and infused with the power of 7 generations. "I am Nahala of the Windwalker clan," she declared in the old tongue. "Daughter of warriors, keeper of the sacred fire, and you are nothing but a coward who abandoned his humanity for false power." The final battle was about to begin. The skinwalker circled Nahala like a predator, its form shifting between man and wolf as dark power coursed through its twisted frame. The lesser spirits formed a ring around them, ensuring no escape while their master prepared for the kill that would complete his abomination. "Your grandmother's trinkets cannot save you," it hissed, somehow sensing the medicine bundle beneath her shirt. "I have devoured 6 souls tonight. Their strength is mine." Nahala untied the leather pouch with deliberate calm, feeling the sacred objects within pulse with warmth. "My grandmother killed 3 skinwalkers in her lifetime. She taught me their weakness." The creature's confidence wavered for just a moment. "Impossible. I am beyond the old magic now." "Are you?" Nahala opened the bundle, revealing items that seemed to glow with their own inner light. A turquoise stone blessed by 7 medicine men, eagle feathers from birds that had never touched the ground, and a small vial of water from the sacred springs where her people had worshipped for 1,000 generations. The skinwalker recoiled as if burned. "You cannot." "I can, and I will." Nahala began to chant in the old tongue, words of power that her grandmother had whispered to her as a child. The very air seemed to thicken around them as ancient forces stirred. Behind her, she heard Helena gasp. The lesser spirits were beginning to smoke and writhe, their borrowed forms becoming unstable, as the sacred words worked their magic. One by one, they dissolved back into the darkness from which they'd come. The skinwalker roared its fury and lunged, claws extended and fangs bared. But Nahala was ready. She caught its wrists in her massive hands and held it at bay while she completed the binding ritual. Sacred water splashed across its face and the creature screamed as its flesh began to bubble and burn. "What have you done?" it shrieked. "Shown you the truth," Nahala replied. "You are not a god, you are barely even alive." The turquoise stone blazed like a star as she pressed it against the creature's forehead. Its false power began to unravel. 6 stolen souls bursting free like doves from a cage. The skinwalker's form shifted and shrank, its supernatural strength bleeding away until only a broken, maddened man remained. "Please," he whispered, suddenly human again. "I didn't mean the, Hunger was so strong." Nahala looked down at him with something approaching pity. Once this had been someone's son, perhaps someone's father. The corruption had devoured his humanity piece by piece until nothing remained but appetite and rage. "I know," she said gently, "but some lines cannot be uncrossed." The eagle feathers fluttered as she drew them across his brow, speaking the final words that would send his tortured spirit to whatever judgment awaited. He crumbled to dust that the wind scattered to the 4 directions. His evil finally ended. Silence settled over the town square like a blessing. "Is it over?" Helena whispered. Kestrel checked the shadows for any remaining threats before holstering his weapon. "It's over." Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The nightmare was ended, but at terrible cost. 7 people had died before they could stop the skinwalker's rampage. "What happens now?" Helena asked, bouncing her baby gently as Melody clung to her skirts. Nahala looked at the scattered dust that had once been their tormentor, then at Kestrel. He stood in the morning light like something out of legend, bloodied but unbowed, a warrior who'd kept his word even when it meant facing horrors beyond imagining. "Now we rebuild," she said. "The dead deserve that much." Kestrel nodded slowly. "My ranch has room for a family, Mrs. Weatherby, at least until you decide what comes next." Helena's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. We can't repay such kindness. You don't need to." He glanced at Nahala. "We take care of our own out here." Our own. The word stirred something in Nahala's chest that she'd thought died with. Her tribe, belonging, purpose, the possibility of a future that wasn't measured in survival alone. But first, there were rituals to perform for the dead, and a town to help heal from its wounds. The real work was just beginning. 3 months after the skinwalker's defeat, Nahala stood on the porch of Kestrel's ranch house, watching Helena's children play in the meadow below. Little Melody chased fireflies while her baby brother took his first wobbling steps across the grass, Helena laughing as she guided him along. The ranch had transformed in their care. What had been a bachelor's rough homestead now showed a woman's touch. Wildflowers in mason jars on the table, curtains at the windows, and the sound of children's laughter filling rooms that had known only solitude for too long. "Thinking deep. Thoughts?" Kestrel asked, emerging from the barn with hay clinging to his silver-streaked hair. "Thinking how strange life can be," Nahala replied. 6 months ago I was marked for slaughter. Now I'm... What? She gestured at the scene below them. Happy, I think. Is that the right word? Kestrel settled beside her on the porch swing he'd built the month before, mindful of her size as the wood creaked under their combined weight. Sounds right to me. The territorial government had awarded them $500 each for stopping the skinwalker's rampage, enough to expand the ranch and purchase proper breeding stock. But the real reward had been watching Dustwater come back to life as families returned and new settlers arrived, drawn by stories of the unlikely partnership between the Apache giantess and the cowboy who'd claimed her. Helena received another letter from her sister in California, Nahala mentioned. She's asking her to come west, says there are opportunities for a young widow. Kestrel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What did Helena say? That she's thinking about it. Nahala studied his profile, noting the way his hands clenched slightly. You care for her. It wasn't a question. Over the months, she'd watched. The gentle way he spoke to Helena, how his eyes followed her movements, the way he made sure she and the children had everything they needed. And she'd seen Helena's shy smiles in return, the way she blushed when he complimented her cooking or praised her courage. She deserves better than a worn-out gunfighter with more ghosts than sense, he said quietly. Does she? Or do you think she deserves better? Kestrel was quiet for a long moment. What about you, Nahala? What do you want from all this? The question she'd been avoiding for weeks hung between them. The ranch was thriving, Helena and the children were safe, and Dustwater had proclaimed them both heroes. She could go anywhere, do anything. Her freedom was absolute for the first time in her adult life. I want to stay, she admitted. Not just because I have nowhere else to go, but because this feels like home. These people, this place, even you. You impossible man, she smiled. You bought me for $1,000 and got the best deal of your life. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Is that what I did? That's exactly what you did. Nahala stood, her impressive height throwing shadows across the porch. Now what are you going to do about Helena? What do you mean? I mean, stop being a noble fool and tell her how you feel. She's not leaving because she wants to. She's leaving because she thinks she's a burden, that you took her in out of duty, not desire. Kestrel's eyes widened. How do you? Because I'm a woman and I pay attention. Nahala headed for the steps. Talk to her, Kestrel, before it's too late. She left him there, wrestling with his conscience and his heart. Below in eye. The meadow, Helena had gathered the children for their evening meal. Soon they would all sit around the big table, sharing food and stories and the comfortable silence of people who belonged together. But first, two stubborn people needed to stop protecting each other from happiness and admit what everyone else could see. That night, as Nahala tended the horses, she heard voices from the porch, Kestrel's low murmur and Helena's soft replies. She couldn't make out words, but the tone spoke of confessions and possibilities, of two wounded hearts finding courage to try again. When she finished her work and returned to the house, she found them sitting close together on the swing, Helena's hand resting in Kestrel's weathered palm, while the children slept peacefully inside. Nahala, Helena called softly. We have something to tell you. She climbed the steps, her massive frame creaking the boards. Let me guess, you're staying. Helena's smile was radiant. We're all staying, together. She paused, suddenly uncertain. That is, if you want to. This ranch belongs to all of us now, but we understand if you want to. Helena. Nahala's voice was gentle but firm. This is my home. These are my people. I'm not going anywhere. Relief flooded the younger woman's face. Then we're really a family? Nahala looked at the unlikely collection of souls that fate had brought together. A reformed gunfighter, a widowed pioneer, two innocent children, and an Apache warrior who'd been marked for meat. They bore no blood relation, came from different worlds, and had every reason to distrust each other. But family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about choice, about standing together when the darkness came, about creating something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. Yes, she said simply. We're really a family. 1 year later, the first snow of winter dusted the mountains around Dustwater, as the whole territory gathered for the most unusual wedding anyone could remember. Nahala stood at the altar of the rebuilt church, resplendent in traditional Apache, wedding regalia that Helena had helped her stitch, while her groom waited with barely contained joy. Magnus Ironwood had arrived in spring with the railroad survey team, a Norwegian giant who matched Nahala's impressive height and possessed a gentle soul that reminded her of mountain streams. He'd taken one look at the legendary Apache giantess and fallen harder than a tree in a windstorm. You sure about this, mountain man? Nahala had teased when he'd asked for her hand. I come with considerable baggage. So do I, he'd replied, in his musical accent. But baggage makes us interesting, yes? Now, as Father O'Malley, who'd replaced the murdered Father Martinez, spoke the traditional vows, Nahala caught sight of her chosen family in the front pew. Helena glowed with her own happiness, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly where Kestrel's child grew. They'd married quietly 6 months ago. A simple ceremony on the ranch with only family present. Melody and little Marcus flanked their new parents, the girl now 9 and increasingly interested in learning Apache traditions from her adopted aunt. Marcus, nearly 2, had appointed himself Nahala's special protector and followed her everywhere on chubby legs. "Do you, Magnus Ironwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do with all my heart," Magnus replied, his deep voice carrying easily through the packed church. "And do you, Nahala Windwalker, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She looked into Magnus's kind blue eyes and saw her future, not the one that had been forced upon her, but the one she'd chosen freely. "I do." The kiss that sealed their union drew cheers from the congregation. Cowboys whooped, townsfolk applauded, and even the territorial governor, who'd made the journey specially for the occasion, smiled broadly. At the reception held in the newly built community center, Nahala found herself surrounded by well-wishers from across the territory. The story of the Apache giantess and her cowboy partner had spread far beyond Dustwater, inspiring dime novels and tall tales that bore little resemblance to the truth. "Speech! Speech!" the crowd called. Nahala rose, her commanding presence quieting the room. "A year ago I stood on an auction block marked for slaughter. Today I stand here as a free woman, surrounded by family and friends who see me not as a curiosity or a commodity, but as a person." She found Kestrel in the crowd, raising her glass to him. "To the man who saw a warrior when others saw only meat. To the courage that risks everything for what's right." Kestrel touched his hat brim in acknowledgement, his arm tight around Helena's waist. "And to Magnus," Nahala continued, turning to her new husband, "who taught me that love comes in all sizes, and the biggest hearts often reside in the gentlest souls." The applause was thunderous, but Nahala wasn't finished. "This territory is changing. We're no longer just survivors scraping out an existence. We're builders, creating something new from the ashes of old conflicts. Apache and Mexican, cowboy, and settler, Norwegian giant, and anyone else brave enough to call this place home." She raised her glass higher. "To family, not just blood family, but chosen family. To the bonds forged in battle and strengthened by choice. To the future we're building together, one day at a time." "To family," the crowd roared back. As the celebration continued into the night, Nahala stepped onto the center's porch for a moment of quiet reflection. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, the same stars her grandmother had used to navigate the desert paths of her youth. Magnus joined her, wrapping his massive arms around her from behind. "Regrets, my warrior wife? Only that my grandmother isn't here to see this," Nahala replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. "She would have liked you. What would she have said about all this?" Nahala smiled, remembering the old woman's weathered face and fierce wisdom. She would have said that the spirits work in mysterious ways, and that sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as defeats. Through the windows they could see their celebration continuing, Helena dancing with Kestrel despite her growing belly, Melody teaching some cowboy children Apache hand games, Magnus's fellow railroad workers attempting to sing Norwegian folk songs while cowboys provided harmonica accompaniment. It was chaos, it was beautiful, and it was home. "What happens next?" Magnus asked. "Whatever we choose to make happen," Nahala replied. "The railroad is coming through, which means more people, more opportunities, more changes. We'll face them together. All of us. All of us." She turned in his arms, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. The Apache giantess, the Norwegian mountain, the reformed gunfighter, and the pioneer woman, plus whatever children come along. To make our family even more complicated, Magnus laughed, the sound rumbling in his broad chest. "I love complications." "Good," Nahala said, standing on her toes to kiss him. Because you just married into the most complicated family in the territory. Inside, the music swelled and voices rose in harmony. Different languages, different backgrounds, all united in celebration. The auction block where Nahala had once stood in chains was long gone, replaced by a community that had learned to see strength in diversity and beauty in the unexpected. From marked for slaughter to beloved matriarch of an ever-growing chosen family, it was a transformation that would have seemed impossible a year ago. But as Nahala had learned, the impossible often had a way of becoming inevitable when courage met opportunity and love conquered fear. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with promise and rich with possibility. And whatever challenges it might bring, they would face them together. Warrior and mountain man, gunfighter and pioneer, children and extended family, all bound by the unbreakable ties of choice and commitment. The Apache giantess had found her place in the world at last, and it was exactly where she belonged.